Ah, 2011. Kind of a forgotten year in pop culture, wouldn't you say? There are a few heavy hitters, but do you seriously know anyone parading around calling this their favorite year? It was a time when superhero movies were really starting to catch on in the mainstream. The MCU was successfully finding its footing, DC was having an insane amount of success with the Nolan Batman films, and I swear the X-Men movies are gonna get good again any moment now. I swear, it's right around the corner. So the fine folks over at Warner Brothers soon realized it was time for them to dip their toes into that same pool that Marvel had been wading around in for a few years and try their hand at a cinematic universe. And what better hero to start with than Batman? Well, Nolan actually has a really tight contract with Warner Brothers, and we're not allowed to put Batman in a cinematic universe right now. How about Superman? Yeah, Superman's been flopping at the box office for a couple decades now. Wonder Woman? Nah, no girls allowed. Aquaman? Nah, he's a huge joke to the general public. Hey, how about The Flash? He's relatable, his powers are simple but cool, and he's never had his own movie, so anyway, Green Lantern. This was Warner Brothers' attempt at making their own Iron Man. It's the only DC Comics movie in existence that feels like an MCU Phase 1 movie. The look, the tone, the tried and true origin story, the bygone early 2010s style of franchise baiting, it's way less Dark Knight Rises and way more Iron Man 2. Even the DC logo at the beginning resembles the old Marvel Studios logo more than I've ever seen. We all remember this movie being awful, including me, and I've never even seen it. I would catch parts of it on TV constantly, and it always seemed just as bad as everyone said, but I've never actually fully sat down and watched it. I'm really looking forward to the new Lanterns show that's starting next week, and I'm a lot more forgiving these days of movies from the pre-streaming era. Check out my last video to learn more. So I thought it would be the perfect time for me to finally settle in and take a real look at this infamous failure, and go in with an open mind to see if there's anything to like here, or even if it's secretly good? So the first 1 minute of this movie is definitely bad. If you're trying to make a summer action blockbuster that appeals to mainstream audiences, never start it with billions of years ago, a race of immortals harnessed the most powerful
light of the universe is 3,600 will sent together these 3,600.
It's obviously way too much at the very beginning of the movie. There are far more elegant ways to weave this exposition and world building into the story. Or you could even just have someone deliver this exact same monologue to Hal a little bit later in the movie once our dumbasses have settled in a little bit. Soon there's a couple of alien astronauts crash-landed on a moon who fall down a pit and then get sucked dry by a different alien with a big head who then turns into a cloud and flies away. But now that that's done, the movie will become good probably. 6 months later, we think we're gonna meet Ryan Reynolds, but in fact we're meeting another kind of alien who's played by Boba Fett, who then has a hologram call with another kind of alien. We're about 5 minutes into the movie, and if I'm a general audience member, I'm already checking out at this point. This is way too many different kinds of aliens saying weird stuff before I've even seen a person. The extended cut actually features an entire scene here of Hal as a little kid, and it's almost 10 minutes long. It does provide some better context for later in the movie, but it also kills this opening's already terrible pacing. Boba Fett gets attacked by Yellow and then needs to escape to the nearest inhabited planet, so this is when we finally cut to Ryan Reynolds in bed with a lady. Plenty of time to turn things around after that weak-ass opening. This guy, Hal Jordan, is a super rad dude who's late for his job flying planes at the Air Force because he was up all night fucking. So he just blasts through the security gate in his sweet classic car. Hey, I feel like you'd get massacred if you did this in real life, no matter who you are. Doesn't matter, we meet his wingman, who's a girl, played by Blake Lively when she was still cool, and his computer guy friend, played by Taika Waititi, back when he was still cool. There's also Tim Robbins, who's trying to sell his new unmanned aerial drones to the military. Or maybe he's a senator or something, I don't really know, but it's Hal Jordan's job to fly his real airplane and demonstrate the capabilities of the unmanned drones. But because of his ego and trauma, he cares more about showing off his skills as a pilot than he does about doing his job, which is to make these drones look good, and decides to blow them up. We don't actually see the drones blow up. Instead, they opt for this Escape from New York style budget-saving technique where you only see the action on a monitor. Now, I'm perfectly fine with the protagonist having flaws and arrogance at the beginning of a movie, but what makes it frustrating to watch is that he's legitimately surprised about getting reprimanded for his actions here. Like, not only did he blow the sale, but these drones cost like $1 trillion each, plus the cost of his own plane. And he used his own wingman as bait, which would have ended very differently for her if this was an actual dogfight and not just a demonstration. His impudence throughout this movie kinda makes me feel like strong will maybe shouldn't be the only criteria when judging who gets to wield this awesome power. Really, willpower and goodness aren't directly connected in any way. Like, sure, Martin Luther King had a lot of willpower, yeah, but so did Ted Bundy. I'm surprised the vast majority of Green Lanterns are so heroic. Flying his plane too high caused Hal to have a PTSD flashback to his dad crashing a plane and blowing up when he was a kid, and that combined with Blake Lively telling him he needs to grow up twice within 10 minutes makes me feel like there's gonna be a big theme about maturing, moving on from your past, and facing your trauma. But then that doesn't happen in the movie. Boba Fett's sitting in his crashed spaceship and tells his ring to send a green ball to find a guy with willpower. Apparently Hal ruined his nephew's birthday by almost dying earlier, but then he makes him feel better by telling him about how he didn't die, and this scene also brilliantly foreshadows the Hot Wheels racetrack that we'll see later. The green ball finally catches up to Hal and brings him to Boba Fett's crash site. Hal tries to help the injured little guy and appears completely unfazed by the fact that he's meeting an alien. Like, he understands it's weird, he gets why Taika's phased when he shows up, but Hal himself just takes it in stride. I mean, you could say he's in shock right now, but he never has much of a reaction to any of the forthcoming insanity. It's strange. Then they have to run away because the helicopters show up at that exact minute. Hey, this alien spaceship crashed here hours ago, but the government didn't think that checking it out or containing the scene was any kind of priority, and even when they do show up, it's just 2 helicopters. I guess it isn't a big deal to them. We cut back to space again. We're gonna be cutting back and forth between various storylines pretty much the whole movie. You know how they say Star Wars was saved in the edit? Well, this is like a movie that wasn't saved in the edit. Sinestro's meeting with the council, telling them about the big yellow cloud who's called Parallax. They apparently already know about the Parallax because they created him or whatever. Sinestro does look amazing. I mean, the CGI suit is a topic of heavy debate, but the makeup looks phenomenal. Then we cut back to Earth to yet another character who we've never met before, but we can tell he's smart because he wears glasses and knows how the knight moves in chess, something I've never been able to get a handle on myself. The government shows up at his front door and brings him to an undisclosed location where he's introduced to Amanda Waller.
Dr. Amanda Waller.
That's kind of interesting. I'm assuming she was going to be this universe's Nick Fury figure, which is what they also tried to do the next time they rebooted this universe. And yeah, she's played by Angela Bassett, you know, she's in lots of stuff, she's Black Panther's mom, all that. Waller says,
An alien life form, Doctor. The first that mankind has ever encountered.
Confirming that the government's late and minuscule response to the spaceship crash earlier was stupid. She brought in our nerd friend here, who's named Hector Hammond, so he could study the alien specimen. The following autopsy scene is kinda dramatic, but then it's intercut with a silly scene of Ryan Reynolds in his apartment trying to get the lantern to work. This movie's a mess, but the dead alien body does look really good. Eventually in Hal's apartment, the lantern decides to stop jerking him around and then imbues him with the power of the oath for him to say. Blake Lively then shows up at his front door at this most inopportune moment, so he decides to take her out to a bar. And you're not gonna believe this, but there's actually a light romantic history between the two of them, but she thinks he's too irresponsible. They love each other, but baggage. Then we get a scene that, even by this movie's standards, feels pretty random, where these guys from the airplane lab apparently tracked Hal down to this bar and they assault him because his reckless actions caused the company to lose a ton of money, which got them fired, further highlighting Hal's selfishness. As he's defending himself, the Ring makes a giant fist and punches these guys, and then it decides it's time to fly Hal through space and get him to Green Lantern World, and again, he mostly takes it all in stride. Then he wakes up covered in Green Lantern suit. The CGI costume is one of the biggest points of contention in this entire movie. Real quick, I also want to say that the green screen environment he wakes up in here looks horrendous, but the suit itself, well, for the most part, I actually kind of like it. Yeah, the mask is awful, and the whole thing kind of sometimes looks like a head floating on a CGI body, but otherwise it totally works for me. We see Green Lanterns in the comics wear both physical suits and ring construct suits. I think both have their place, but for the story they're attempting to tell in this movie, the suit makes a lot more sense as a construct of the ring. And in that context, I think it's good that it doesn't look 100% realistic. I think if it looked more tactile, it would take away from what it's supposed to be. And I find this otherworldly, rubbery, fleshy texture to be neat. It seems the rings in this universe construct a suit that's similar to the skin or the anatomy of the wearer, because we soon see a scaly guy with a scaly suit, then a minute later we see a bunch of different aliens, all with their own differently textured costumes, all kinds of stuff, even like a robot one. You gotta admit this is at least a little cool. So yeah, there's my hot take. I like the 2011 Green Lantern costume, but the mask is unforgivable, of course. This is the homeworld of the Green Lanterns. They call it
Welcome to our...
Sinestro is the man in charge of the Green Lanterns, or is like a liaison to the council who's in charge. I don't know, but the thing is, even if you've never read a comic in your life and didn't know that this guy is Green Lantern's main villain, everything about him just screams bad guy. The malevolent performance from Mark Strong, the fact that he looks like the devil, or that his name is Sinestro, I don't know, it just seems kind of stupid. The Green Lanterns need to get Ryan Reynolds trained up fast because of the impending Parallax issue, so we get an okay-ish training montage. At one point, Green Lantern's trainer Kilowog constructs a small star with his ring. I suppose that's kind of cool, but then he says,
"That's the gravitational pull of your average sun."
If this construct really contained the gravitational pull of an entire sun, then wouldn't everything around them get sucked into it? Like everything? Like the entire planet? Also, the CGI floor looks terrible. Then when Hal's fighting Sinestro, Sinestro uses his ring to make a Captain America shield, which I found odd.
What the
All the Green Lanterns are like, "Oh, you think you're good enough to be a Green Lantern? Well, we're gonna make you prove how bad you want it." Like, what? Dude, he didn't even ask for this. He barely even knows what's going on. Then when he decides it is too much for him and tries to leave, they're all like, "Aw, man, come on, man, we need you, man." But he had a bad time, so he heads home. And the movie doesn't clarify until later if he's just unsure about being a Green Lantern or if he's decided to give up completely. Dr. Hammond is hearing voices in his head while he's teaching his class and accidentally flings a student across the room with his psychic abilities and then realizes his blood is getting weird. It also turns out that he's Tim Robbins' son, and he goes to Tim Robbins' office where they have a conversation about nepotism, where I guess Hector resents his dad for trying to use his high-ranking position to get him jobs that he's not qualified for. At this point in the movie, I started to become a little intrigued, because this has the potential to be quite an interesting dynamic that could lead to a complex villain. Take a guess as to how well this movie fulfills that potential. Meanwhile, in space, a group of Lanterns quickly loses a fight to Parallax. Not sure why they only sent like 10 and not like 1,000. Don't tell me they're too busy. I just saw them all hanging around, all standing around on a planet waiting around for a speech that could have been an email. You're telling me that was more pressing than the yellowest enemy you've ever faced? But Sinestro and the Council decide that things have gotten so dire that they have to do the thing that Parallax did that made him evil and get thrown into eternal prison. Create a yellow ring. Yellow is the color of fear, which is bad, as opposed to willpower, which is good. So a yellow ring is a evil ring. Again, it's what caused Parallax to turn evil and try to destroy the whole universe. But this time we think we've got a handle on it. Meanwhile, at this fancy party, Hammond is apparently mad at Ryan Reynolds because his dad, Tim Robbins, likes Ryan Reynolds more. We're past the halfway point in the movie, which feels a little late to start establishing the relationship between the hero and the villain, but better late than never, I guess. And for what it's worth, the extended cut actually does establish this dynamic right off the bat. Hector's alien psychic powers are making him extra volatile, so he uses them to try to crash his dad's helicopter as it's taking off from the party. This is a very famous scene in the movie. As the crashing helicopter is about to hit Blake Lively, Green Lantern constructs a 1950s hot rod to catch the helicopter, and obviously that makes sense, but then for some reason, instead of bringing the helicopter safely to a stop, he also constructs a giant Hot Wheels track to drive his fun little car around on for a little bit. I'm sure they'd like us to think that this helicopter was moving too fast to stop on a dime without killing Tim Robbins and his co-pilot, but if you have enough control over a construct for all of this, then you also have enough control to bring it to a safe stop. And when I say this is a Hot Wheels track, it legitimately has the physics of a plastic Hot Wheels track. And kudos to the effects team for getting that right, but this is, of course, still absurd. And then once Blake Lively is no longer in danger from the crashing helicopter, some scaffolding almost crushes her, which Green Lantern also stops. Like, it's fine for the superhero's love interest to be in peril in a movie, but it's really stupid that she seems to be the only one in danger from the helicopter or the scaffolding. Hector Hammond goes home and his head starts getting real big so he can look like Parallax, and again, hey, great makeup in this movie. The next morning, Taika goes over to Hal's apartment because he wants to see the Green Lantern stuff after last night's display. And this is the scene where I realized he's actually attempting an American accent.
That's the best you could come up with
for your first big appearance.
What was even the point of making this character American? I used to get these fucking guys mixed up all the time back then. Taika says superheroes get the girls, so Ryan Reynolds goes to talk to Blake Lively. She clocks him right away, which makes sense because this mask obviously isn't hiding anything. But earlier, Saru said that the ring forms the mask when the wearer's identity needs to be concealed. So why does it do such a bad job of that? Make a better mask, Ring. In this scene, they watch a romantic sunset, and he informs her and us that he did fully quit the Green Lantern Corps, but her wise words convince him to reconsider.
If for once you didn't quit something you cared about, what's the worst that could happen?
See, you don't understand how deep this line is, because she is referring to him quitting the Green Lanterns, but it also applies to their romance that he was afraid to commit to. It just says so much with so few words. There's an insane scene where Waller goes to get Hammond from his lab, and when she touches him, we learn through psychic visions that she has a whole tragic backstory that is never mentioned outside of this one moment. That would probably be expanded upon in later movies from this cinematic universe. Hal is staring at the ocean, contemplating his choice to quit, and I'm like, what? The Green Lanterns allowed him to quit but still keep the ring? It's such a powerful object for some random guy to have. Plus, they all mention that that particular ring has a lot of sentimental value to them, having belonged to their dead friend Boba Fett. You'd think they'd want it back. Hammond has finally gone full supervillain, something that the SHIELD facility is apparently 0% prepared for. Green Lantern shows up to stop him, and there's a kind of fun part where he saves Waller by making a construct of water to catch her and then carry her away safely. It's a little stupid, but a little fun. But then whatever I liked about that is immediately canceled out by this flamethrower he makes, which is able to shoot a regular orange flame, not a Green Lantern construct flame, which to me opens up a massive can of worms concerning what these rings can actually make. Like, okay, you probably can't make real food, but could you make a green vending machine that dispenses real food? Could you make a green chicken that can produce an actual egg that an actual chick could hatch out of? What was the decision process behind making this flame a real flame? Why did they not just make it green? This minigun from earlier also appears to be shooting real bullets, so what the hell? Hammond and Green Lantern fight some more. Hammond kills his dad, then he screams, then he's gone from the room, so we cut to Hal back at his apartment with Taika and Blake Lively. Ryan Reynolds says,
"The one thing that a Green Lantern is supposed to be is fearless. Fearless is the job description."
But I don't think that's true. It's clearly high on the list for these guys, but if you have to narrow it down to the one thing a Green Lantern is supposed to be, it's strong of will. And you can be strong of will while still being fearful. The two aren't mutually exclusive. Hal's loosely defined, ever-present sense of fear that stems from the PTSD of watching his dad explode is all we ever learn about him. He has no other backstory, his motivations are unclear, his personality varies wildly from scene to scene. This is one thing that the early MCU movies really got right, establishing the main hero as a human being, even if the rest of the movie was kinda weak. In this, Hal is just vaguely Ryan Reynolds. He's not even full Ryan Reynolds, which is something we're all starting to get pretty tired of, but it's better than nothing. Also, all that stuff that was set up in the beginning about Hal needing to grow up and face his trauma obviously doesn't end up leading to anything. He never actually conquers his trauma, rather Blake Lively just reminds him that he is stronger than fear, and then he finds the will within himself, which gives him way more Green Lantern power and fixes his PTSD. Anyway, the Council's done making the yellow ring, so Sinestro's about to start training the Lanterns on how to use it, but then Hal shows up and says, "How dare you make a yellow ring, you fools?" He pleads with them to help him save the Earth, and they say fuck no, so then he begs them, "Please at least let me fight to save my world." And like, what? Since when does he need their permission to do that? He was already doing that. It's not like they took away the ring or his powers or anything, what the hell? And also, it's again like Hal's all mature and intelligent all of a sudden because he needs to give an impassioned speech to the Council. Where did all this wisdom come from? It's just that we're at the point in the movie where the hero has grown and evolved. For some reason, I was still holding out hope that the third act could be really entertaining, but it's basically on par with the rest of the movie. Not the worst thing ever, but still pretty lame. Hal gets back to Earth to find the damsel is in distress again. He tries to reason with Hammond, it doesn't work, but hey, that makeup is still looking great. Then he does a stupid little trick and then saves Blake Lively and defeats Hammond. Parallax finally shows up and he's mad at Hammond, so he kills him real quick, and then it's time for a big fight in the city. Green Lantern utilizes catapult counterattack, springs under fuel truck, anti-aircraft gun, riot shield, flies through Parallax with an airplane propeller. It's not amazing, but some of these constructs are kinda fun. Like, if this movie was truly awful, they'd just have him shooting green light beams at the monster. It's not great, but there's some creativity on display here. It is quite lame that this movie did the same thing as that Fantastic Four movie, where they took a villain from the comics that looks cool and then just turned it into an evil space cloud. But Parallax does get a bit more slack here because it definitely looks cooler than Galactus did in Fantastic Four, and also it looks less different from the comic version than Fantastic Four. Also, apparently Parallax's body is made up of all the souls of all the people he's killed throughout the eons, which, like, that's really cool, but you can barely tell in the movie. As they fight through space, thankfully Green Lantern remembers that the sun is hot and has a gravitational pull, a lesson he of course learned earlier in the movie. He makes some fighter jets that are apparently stronger at flying than Parallax, and puts Parallax into the sun. It's too much for him, so Hal passes out, but is saved at the last minute by the 3 other Green Lanterns he's talked to in this movie. They take him back to and declare him the most Green Lantern of all time, and now the whole Corps respects him and humanity. Then back on Earth, he finally kisses Blake Lively.
That's really cool.
Incorrect. The credits roll, and I'm informed that this movie was edited by Stuart Baird, the director of the hit 2002 film Star Trek Nemesis. What an asshole. We're actually treated to a mid-credits scene, which seemed kinda cool at first, where Sinestro puts on the yellow ring, but then I'm like, wait, why did Sinestro do that? During the movie, his motivations for considering using the evil yellow power made sense. There was an imminent threat that they had already failed to defeat a couple of times, and at great cost, so he began to give in to fear in this desperate situation. But then once the threat is gone, he just says, yeah, I'm gonna try that evil ring anyway, though. Are you trying to tell me that the Parallax threat was just an excuse for him to try to selfishly gain more power? He does look like a bad guy, but there was nothing about his actions in the movie to suggest that he was anything other than a righteous and noble superhero who believed in the sanctity of green. I don't get it. So I did seriously go into this movie with an open mind, but no, it remains terrible. I wouldn't say it's even close to the worst superhero movie of all time. In fact, DC has produced a shocking amount of movies since this that are far worse. So I think this one will go down a bit easier than it once did if you choose to revisit it, but if you don't feel the need to ever rewatch this, that's probably the move. To me, the biggest problem was this constant gnawing feeling that every scene was completely modular. Like it was designed so that any shot or any line could be taken out and replaced with a dozen alternate options they already had on standby, depending on how test audiences were feeling. It never feels like there's a coherent vision behind anything. It makes it really hard to get a handle on the tone of any scene or the personality of the main character. Additionally, all the lore and world building is really convoluted, but also pretty vague. Ryan Reynolds is supremely miscast in the role. He seemed really committed, but he was never going to be a good fit for this character. And I also found myself to be super bored, especially during the second half. There's some unforgivable CGI throughout the whole thing, but I was a fan of the visuals overall. I found most of the effects to be pretty good, lots of fantastic makeup, I like the cinematography and the warm, orangey color palette in most of the Earth scenes. It contrasts really nicely with the green. And I have a lot of nostalgia for this era of movies, even though that of course has nothing to do with the actual quality. I'm also starting to get a little annoyed at how much Ryan Reynolds has trashed this over the years. Like, it was funny a couple of times, and I get wanting to distance yourself from it, but it's starting to feel like you're throwing a bunch of people under the bus. I think there was a time, like maybe 2019, where a sequel to this could have been really well received, especially if they leaned more into the soft reboot type of sequel, Suicide Squad style. Like during that specific point in history when Ryan Reynolds and Taika Waititi were both super beloved and Warner Brothers DC was just throwing whatever they could think of at the wall to see what stuck. But the time for all of that is long since past. Instead, Green Lantern's getting its second chance on the premium cable network HBO. The DCU's had a tough year so far, but I'm optimistic about this new show. So I'd love to hear what you think in the comments. Are you a defender of this movie? Are you still holding out hope for the return of Zack Snyder like a very sane and rational person? If you're watching this video in the future, is there anything you think this movie ended up doing better than the Lanterns TV show? I want to hear all of that. And if you're desperate for more of my mind-blowing Green Lantern content, you should go ahead and check out out my second channel where I just played the tie-in game for this movie, which was very weird and interesting and not that bad. You can even subscribe to my Patreon if you want to give me money and get access to some amazing perks. Now go make yourself a smoothie.